microphone for Nick? We can arrange, conference calls intermittently, breakout sessions. We don't need to have a whole group here for talking about financing or marketing. We have a little marketing group. We have the finance group. We have the PR group. So we could easily do that, low budget, short notification, and we can hold these with regularity in addition to physical meetings like we're having today.
Correct. I'm very much in favor of those conference calls and that sort of thing. It's just, I think, a matter of getting in that 3 or 4 page summary of this meeting people who want to participate.
Good.
That's, the people really are more important than the money at this point.
Yeah.
So we get the people, the money, the corporate structure. We're on our way to making this happen at that point.
Okay. Any other comments, John?
Does it make sense at this point to think about or nominate initial directors, perhaps in relation to how much they or their associates are putting into it, and then let the decision for CEO be chosen by the board of directors and the name for the corporation be chosen by the board of directors? Does that make any sense?
I think it's really enough by email to nominate or suggest some board. But I think this will work out some of those details, how big the board should be, the profile of the people we want on the board. Do we want, sure, obviously if somebody puts in a lot of money and they're well qualified, I'd be on the board, sure, they made a commitment. And they're going to be holding the CEO's feet to the fire a lot more than people without a commitment. Bill, do you have any?
Well, as we discussed a little bit over lunch, we want to get a manageable size board. We envision this board being a little bit more scientific in as far as their qualifications, because they're going to have to make some scientific decisions as to where money flows and what milestones are really being made. Because if they're just business people, they might be deceived into thinking something's happening when it really isn't.
Does it make sense to have a separate scientific advisory board separate from the management board?
It probably does.
Yeah.
I agree. We have to have at least some members of the board who have the expertise, the scientific expertise, to make decisions about what companies or what technologies to fund. But it is important to have business people on the board also, because it's much more than just which technology. It's the evaluation of the financial status of the company, the evaluation of the management of the company, and it'd be good to have at least one attorney on the board, I think, too. Not that I'm a big fan of attorneys, but fortunately, unfortunately, I've had a lot of contact with them over the last 20 years or so.
I've met a number of scientists who have also additionally business experience. Prana Biotech with Ashley. What's his name? Last name? Ashley Bush, and we have Greg Stock. We have a number of people that could potentially.
Yeah, we have Martine. I don't know if she would have the time, but yeah, tremendous science and
those would be the people
experience.
You probably tap, maybe 1 or 2 just initially.
Dave already mentioned something about this, but I do think that people or entities that put substantial assets into this should have significant input on these kinds of issues, like what people should be on the board, and if we are looking for a chief executive and stuff like that.
Bear in mind, the initial $5 million that we hope to raise will be the seed money, where we'll then be potentially raising a lot more in the public arena. So those people, some shareholder may put in a lot of money who we may not like his ideas, so I guess we have to write into the bylaws how we control that. We might want to have the founders maybe have some control.
Well, the person who puts in a lot of money doesn't mean he gets to choose who that money is going to. He might be able to get to choose someone who would be on the board, but he wouldn't be the only one. If he just says, I want, Popeye or something on the board, but he wouldn't necessarily be on the board.
Okay, well, the real challenge once the concept's coming up with is executing. And I think we've impressed enough people, and certainly had enough people over the last 3 days It's remarkable the number of people just came down here for half a day and then they left, but because they had other commitments. But the interest was there, and they showed up. Some of them on my invitation and other people's invitation. So, you know, I see this very clearly as working for all kind of different reasons. I see it working, and I've had enough experience just working with Life Extension over the last 30 years to get a feel for how our members would view something like this. They would view it very favorably. And I want to say I've told quite a few members about what we were doing this weekend. The enthusiasm level was extremely high. So there's an understanding that something has to be done, and what's being done right now is not quite enough to achieve the ultimate objective. So I think this is something that the public, or at least our kind of people, really want to see happen.
That's very encouraging. Thank you, Bill. And by the way, thanks again for your support, you guys. I mean, Life Extension made this happen. They underwrote the whole thing. And do we have any more comments on this subject? I have another subject that I want to cover. Any last comments? Good, thank you. Oh, by the way, Greta, the health nut over here, is offering up. She'll share her Twinkies with anybody that.
Hey, David, just a real quick comment relative to the list that Greta talked about putting together. You guys gave a great example of some collaboration here. And all I was going to do is suggest that relative to the list, I'm sure that there are a lot of things that other people are involved in or do or have access to that, if identified, would stimulate some collaboration.
So we want to identify our needs.
Yeah, expand on the bios maybe a little bit, and not so much to say, you know, here's somebody's, you know, pedigree, but here are some areas of key interest and resources that, you know, Gil said, pick my brain on financing. Mm-hmm. You know, there's a lot of different things that, you know, that we did not have a chance to meet and talk to people about that could be valuable through this process.
Good, very good, thank you. Okay, now one thing I want to comment on, as you know, we're videotaping this whole thing. We're going to be producing a documentary, and as you also know, Steve Coles asked Oliver if he would help get that produced at his expense, and you know, hopefully he'll follow through and keep his commitment. I think he will. Kind of caught him off guard, but it was very generous of him to do that. And we have a chance now to take this message through this documentary that we're going to be producing, through trailers that we can produce out of all, we have what, 20-some, 30, I don't know, 25 hours of video, maybe more with the private interviews, 30 hours of video, all high def, everything great sound, huge, massive, incredibly powerful tool if it's used the right way. So how do we promote this whole movement using these tools? We have the video, we will have it, the documentary. LifeStar is coming out with I can talk about the white paper? They're coming out with a white paper that is showing the scientific rationale, and, you know, signed by world-class, very famous. Do you have any Nobel laureates on there yet?
We've actually been in touch with 4, but they're not yet.
Well, they're going to sign this. Is it a white paper? Is that basically what it is?
The paper is a policy. The paper is a policy paper. Aubrey de Grey's a co-author with George Martin, Tuck Finch, Judy Campisi, all luminaries in the gurus in the biogerontological field, and we're talking, well, basically optimization, regeneration, and also other biomedical types of approaches.
So with implementation, we have a lot of tools. We have the white, the paper, very credible. We find a celebrity. We have the scientific roadmap, again backed by credible scientists. I have my little book, which I'm not trying to sell. Just I'm going to edit this when I have time and catch it up based on information we got from this conference. Maybe have a chapter in there about financing. We have the social media, everything that Oliver and other people can contribute. So we have some really powerful tools, guys, girls, everybody.
I'll amend that for you by taking content and turning it into tutorials and things that we could target and market towards mainstream America, even if it's just free content that's available to them. So that could also then be expanding on some of those topics, which means then we open the door to things like webinars and things for the evolution and engagement of that audience.
John has very special expertise in doing this exact kind of thing.
Dave, you mentioned about the videos. I have several questions about that. Is there an anticipated length on the video at this point?
Actually, yes. We talked about several. And I got an idea even beyond that once this thing started. The length would be, first of all, starting with about a 5-minute trailer, 5-minute promo video, maybe 10 minutes. Then we talked about producing less than 60 minutes for television, allowing for commercials, maybe PBS it would be 60 minutes, and an hour and a half to 2 hours, or a little less than 2 hours, if we ever got good enough and lucky enough to get on the big screen. Now, we also had individual presentations. For example, Ralph is very powerful as a stand-up cryonicist.
I'd probably be good at stand-up.